So I thought I'd share a story about a traumatic experience that I had when I was 22 years old. And I don't know why I want to share it. I think, I don't know, sometimes we've got to remember people, and sometimes we've got to remember the things that we've gone through, and sometimes it helps to share things. It's not something I don't think I've not dealt with or anything, but I know that we're going through some really hard times and some people are really struggling, so I don't know if it's going to help anybody or not. It probably won't, but I'll just put it out there. So this happened when I was 22 years old, and that was the day I found out that my dad had died. And from finding out that he died on holiday in America to actually concluding all that should have happened, which is the funeral and all the rest of it, took 1 year, a whole year of stress, and it was terrible. So he went away on holiday. He'd divorced my mum. He was on his own. He was 42 years old. He was an alcoholic. He took a £10,000 loan out. He went to San Francisco in the States, and he was supposed to have gone for 2 weeks, but he never came back. And so I don't know how long, about maybe a few days after he'd set off, my family came round to see me and said the police have been in touch and he's dead. And I wasn't shocked, because when somebody drinks that heavily and they've got to a point where you see them passing out constantly and things, you think that person's not going to be here for much longer anyway. So I wasn't shocked by it. But what had happened is, on the first day there, he'd gone for a drink or 10, and he'd got absolutely plastered and then got into a hot bath and he drowned. And again, I wasn't shocked about that because it had nearly happened previously and my mum had pulled him out of the bath. So it wasn't a great big shock that he'd done it. And at the time, Bonnie, at the time, you just don't think straight anyway. But as it turns out, I was the next of kin, which meant all responsibility fell onto me. So I had to get him back from America. I was 22 years old and really wet behind the ears. I had no idea what to do. So it started off with the sheriff at Los Angeles Police Department phoning me and saying, we need you to get him out of here, and it's going to cost you £10,000 to get his body flown back. And I just didn't have the money, and I couldn't do it. So I said I can't possibly do it. And so they became increasingly angry with me over time, because no matter what they said, whether they got emotional blackmail, threats, whatever they said, I couldn't do anything with it. So it got to a point where they were just trying to make me feel terrible about myself. And I remember I would have to go down to my friend's flat at night time to phone them to have a chat with them about what can we do, because I didn't have a phone and the time difference was really out there. So I had to take my children to bed really quite late at night. It caused a lot of stress and a lot of upset, but it was mostly because of how we was treated. Because I was poor and I couldn't afford to bring him back home, I was made to feel like I was disgusting. And then I said, but he's insured. And they said, well, you need to get in hold of the insurance company and sort it with them. So I did. And the insurance company said, we can't pay no money out whatsoever until we've got an autopsy, a post-mortem, because we need to know how he died. So all I knew at that moment is that he'd been found in the bath, and the cause of death was not known at that time. So it dragged on and on and on, and as time went on, I just got used to the stress. And it's one of those things where you don't even realise how stressed you are, because you just go into autopilot and you just get on with it. But there were times when I'd start to really like freak out, and one of them was the insurance company themselves got a guy to contact me to say, you need to start making payments back, because he was supposed to have made monthly repayments. And I said, but I haven't took out the loan. And they said, that isn't the point, you're next of kin, so the debt is yours. So I had the police department wanting $10,000 to send him back in a coffin, and the insurance company wanted £10,000 from me to cover the loan that he'd taken. My husband walked out on me the day that I found out my dad had died, because he couldn't cope with anything, and so I was left alone, and it was ridiculous. And as time went on, it became increasingly more and more hopeless. The feeling of, what do you do, what can you do in this situation, because people are threatening you on two sides for all this money and you don't have none. And what ended up happening was I was in a stalemate situation, and I couldn't give anybody anything, so they started having to bring other people in as well. So the police officer says to me, we're going to transfer his rotting carcass, and those were the words she used, we're going to transfer his rotting carcass to an undertaker, because we can't cope with the smell of it anymore in here. And then she says to me, do you know what it feels like to have to work in a police department with a rotting carcass behind you in the other room, with no refrigeration, in a heat wave? Can you imagine what it smells like in here? She said. Well, that's not how to speak to someone, is it? And it isn't the sort of words you should say to somebody who's 22 years old and have lost the father. But that's how she spoke to me. So it was removed, taken to the undertaker, not undertaker, the, what do they call them where they do the autopsies? And they did an autopsy, but they wanted something like $3,000 to do that, and I couldn't afford nothing. So they started the arguing with me then, and it was constant arguing, and I felt so deflated, because I didn't know what to do. And so he ended up doing the autopsy, and he came back and said that a certain amount of alcohol was found in his blood, which made the insurance company state that he was now null and void. The insurance was null and void. There was no way was he going to be getting covered in any regards whatsoever. It's just come to me now. I've just been saying I was arguing with the insurance company. It wasn't, it was the loan company. Sorry about that. So it was the loan company wanting the 10 grand back, and the police department wanted the 10 grand initially to bring him back, and then the insurance company was another thing that was going on, so they refused to pay anything. They said it's in the small print that if there's any alcohol found in the blood, you null and void on the insurance. And that made some people really angry, because they said when people go abroad, especially, you know, to places like, I don't know, Spain and whatever, people go there to drink, party, sunbathe and all the rest of it, and you don't realise that. I don't know if it's changed now, but if you have got an insurance policy for an holiday, always read the small print, because I don't know whether my dad would have even bothered with that insurance if he'd known this, because it just nulled everything out. So the I keep calling him undertaker, the guy who does the autopsy, I can't think straight, says to me, what do you want me to do with him? And I said, look, this is the story, this is how it is. I've been threatened, I've been coerced, I've been everything, and it hasn't changed the storyline. And he was actually a really nice guy, and he said, right, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to cremate him, and I'm going to charge you $68, I think it was. $68. And I'm like, right. And he said, and I will send you the ashes back to England. And I'm like, oh my God, as if they couldn't have done that in the first place. So he arranged to do all that, but this is months down the line. I mean, bear in mind, it took nearly a year to get this sorted out. In the meantime, I was getting harassed by the loan company, and now it involved two guys, and they were both around my age or a little bit older. And one of the guys on the phone was saying, you sound like you've got a really lovely voice there, you sound like a nice girl, we can come to an agreement. And I'm saying, but what can I do? And he said, how about you just pay £10 a week, £20 a week? I said, I can't afford it, honestly, I just can't. Because when my husband walked out on me, I had to go and sign on. And there was a process of waiting for the payments to come through and everything. And it wasn't the amount of money I'd been used to living on, so I couldn't afford it. So as time went on, he brought his other friend in from his office, and they started to harass me, and ridiculously so. And it got to a point where it all came to a big, massive, it was just, I think it was about 10 months down the line when I just lost it big time. And what had happened is, this guy had says to me, I'm going to come round to your house on Friday night because I know where you live, because I've got your address, and I'm going to come round and take the money. And I started crying on the phone, and I said, I haven't got the money, and I don't want you to come to my house because I've got babies here. And he went, I'm not going to take cash. And I'm like, well, what are you going to do then? I haven't got anything to steal even. My accumulative goods, in furniture wise and everything, it wasn't worth anything, you know. And he said, I'm not talking about that either. And I'm like, well, what are you talking about then? And he said, me and you, and I'll bring my friend round. And then the other guy joined in on the conversation and said, I'll come in round as well, and we'll get his money back out of you that way. And I was just absolutely devastated because I didn't know what to do. And I went onto the road, and thank God for this at the time, because this was like a community centre in the estate, and it was called the Parents Centre, and they did all kinds of things like college courses and different courses on all kinds of things, like you could do first aid and crafts and all kinds of stuff, but they also had a support for money. So these were called like the financial advisors and stuff. And I went on there to get a drink, and I was sat there, and then one of the ladies came into the room who worked there, and she looked at me and she said, what's wrong? And I couldn't speak, and she said, come with me. So I went into her office, and she said, tell me everything, and I couldn't stop crying. And when I told her what had happened, she just went mental, absolutely mental. And she said, have you got the number for the loan company? And I said, it's at home. She said, go and get it for me now. So I walked on the road to get it, and I came back, and she said, I just want you to sit there and say nothing. And she phoned the loan company up and said, put me in touch with your manager right away. And the manager came on the phone and said, what can I do for you? And she said, you can get rid of this £10,000 worth of debt that does not belong to my client, because it's not a debt. She hasn't signed anything, and her dad's died, and it's died and it's gone, that's it, you're not getting no money off of her. And the manager said, well, I understand that. And she said, well, you need to tell these two blokes this. So she told him what they'd done. And I don't know whether this really happened or not. I was there in the call, and I heard the manager go mad, and I heard him call the two men into his office, and I heard him say, what the hell is this? And then he said, can I phone you back? And then a few minutes later he phoned her back and said, I fired them both. So I don't know if he really did, or whether he just told us that to appease us. All that mattered at the time is that they just quit. And that was the day I got left alone by them. So that was the day that I could breathe out and go, oh, thank God, because she took away that burden of, you owe £10,000 to these people. That was really stressful, but it disappeared there. And it's funny, that disappeared, that stress. And then another stress disappeared when my dad's ashes turned up. And this is a funny story. Now, you've got to learn how to laugh even in dire situations sometimes. But I was at home on my own and there was a knock at the door. And I answered and it's the postman. And he's got a parcel in his hand for me. And I went to get it and he started singing happy birthday to me. And I just stood there and I thought, oh God. And when he'd finished he said, so who's this from then, you lucky girl, getting a parcel all the way from America? And I went, it's not my birthday. And he went, oh okay. And I went, it's not a parcel. And he went, oh. I went, it's my dad. And his face just dripped white. And he fell on my doorstep. He fell down like he'd passed out. Oh God. And I had to bring him into my house and make him a hot cup of tea. And he was shaking and he was absolutely, oh God, and he kept saying, I'm so sorry, oh please, I'm so sorry. And I said, look, it's not your fault, you didn't know. And he goes, I feel terrible, terrible. And then he went, I've been walking around with your dad all morning. And I sat there and I'm like, God, he had my dad in his bag all day and he didn't know it was my dad. Oh, no, I'm ignoring it. So anyway, right, hang on. It's going to start again now. So, yeah, there was that. And I went on to the parents' centre because I couldn't cope, because I was sat at the kitchen table with my dad on the table in this urn. And there was a note and his death certificate with it all. And on the note it said something about, it said his name and the birth weight, and I think he weighed £8.3, and then the ashes weighed £8.3. And I'm sat there and I just didn't feel anything. I didn't know what to do. I just didn't know what to do. So I goes on to the parents' centre and I walked in and I just sat there quiet, and all these girls were sat there and one of them said, what's wrong, Kelly? And I said, I don't know what to say. I said, my dad. And she went, what about it? And I went, it's not funny, but it is. I said, he went to America, second class British Airways, and he's just come back first class Royal Mail. And I didn't say it like I was laughing, I just said it like that. And the room just went into total silence. One of the lasses just went, she stood up and she walked out of the room and she started screaming, laughing. And I mean laughing. And I'm sat there thinking, oh God. And then I started laughing and then everybody else started laughing. And my mum worked there at the time and she came downstairs and went, what's wrong? And this girl says to my mum, she said, your Kelly's just cracked me up. She said, Brenda, it's not funny, but I can't help it. It was how she said it. He goes on holiday, second class British Airways, and comes back first class Royal Mail. Well, we were just howling for ages, like really howling. And I thought, God, looking back now, how grateful I am, because if I hadn't have had that place, and if I hadn't have had those people, and if they hadn't have turned a crisis into something to laugh about, I wouldn't have been laughing about that at home on my own. I'd have been cracking up and crying all the time, do you know? So this is why we need communities. This is why we need each other, because they got me through some really dark times, them people. But oh gosh, I laughed. And when I went home, I realised that they'd actually healed something inside of me. I'm going to have to go in a minute because he's going to come round. That's Paul next door saying, do you want your tea? I'm psychic. So, yeah, it took a year to get him back. And it was after that part 2 happened. I might do a video on that another time. Because, do you know, when you're going through something really stressful, you go into autopilot and just cope with it. And it's the aftermath, isn't it? So I'll leave it there because I'm getting harassed now on the phone. So yeah, I just thought I'd share that, just because I think it's important we keep away from what the government are telling us to do about keeping away from each other, because we need each other. When things happen in life, we need each other more than ever, and I don't think it's a good thing to be separated. So I just think it's important that we keep our communities and keep our contact with each other. So I'm going to go. I'll see you later. I'm just going to add this on to the end of the video because I've just watched it and realised I've missed the bits of the story out which are quite important. One of the things is that my dad was in the RAF, so I got told by the local councillor at the time. She was the Labour Party in Halifax, and she said you need to contact the RAF because he was one of their people, so he's known as a veteran really, so they might be able to help. And they came back and said no. And then she was a really good, and her name was Alice Mann, and she was the Labour Party at the time. And she said, I'm going to take this to the House of Lords. And it went to the House of Lords, and it was all over the papers as well. Now I did have all the photographs and everything and newspaper cuttings of what had happened, because I used to save everything, because I used to be in the paper a lot, and my ex got rid of all my stuff, including all that stuff, which is a shame really, because it's like the family history, and it's quite important to look back on for my children really, to say, look, you know, I'm not just your mum, I've achieved a lot of things and done a lot of things in my life, and here's a lot of the stuff that you'll have forgotten about. So, but yeah, it went to the House of Lords, and I actually got a letter from Douglas Hurd at the time, and it was an apology saying, I'm sorry, we can't help you with anything, but at least it went to the House of Lords and it was brought up there, and it was in the front page of a lot of the papers as well that he died over there, and I was a single parent because of it and stuff, and I just didn't know what to do. And I got a few people from the public contact the papers to say, can you pass a message on to her? And one of them was from a pervert. He said, I saw a picture in the paper and thought, oh, she's so lovely, just wondered if she needs anything, you know, like any help with anything. And they passed the messages on to me, and I thought, so I think, I can't remember how it worked out, but I remember really early on coming to the conclusion it was just a pervert, you know, so I thought that wasn't genuine. But somebody else offered me stuff, like some toys for the children and things like that, so it was really nice. But yeah, it came down to them, basically a battle of wills, and the guy I was talking about was a coroner. Why did not, my brain wasn't working. It was the coroner who did the autopsy, and it was the coroner's report that said he had alcohol, and it was the coroner who said, I'll just charge you, I think it was $68 or something like that. Now, when my dad came back in the post, I forgot to mention also that with him also was his belongings. So I got back his camera, and it was something like $38. They reckoned that's what he had left, $38. And that was a blatant lie after he took out £10,000. But so somebody stole that money. We'll never know who. And that's the end of it really. So I think I might do another story about what happened afterwards, because yeah, it's quite telling, because I suppose it comes down to PTSD then, doesn't it? So I'll put this up on now actually. Might as well share it, and yeah.